You know that specific feeling of despair when you try to learn a new language as an adult?
Oh, I know it well. I think anyone who's tried knows that feeling.
You're sitting there maybe staring at a conjugation table or you're trying to make a sound your mouth just refuses to make.
Like that French R.
Exactly. The French R, that sounds like you're gargling, and you can practically hear your brain grinding its gears. It feels like a strictly downhill battle.
It is a humbling experience. It really feels like your hard drive is full.
Exactly. But here's the question that really sparked my interest for today, and I think it's something a lot of you will relate to. If you've already climbed that mountain once, if you've already learned a second language, does the third one get any easier?
Is it just more the same, or does something fundamentally change?
Right. Does your brain actually unlock a new strategy?
It's a question that feels like it should have a simple answer, but the reality is fascinatingly messy. We tend to bucket language learning into two categories,
The one you learn as a baby, which is effortless.
and then everything else, which is hard. But the research we're looking at today suggests the brain doesn't just have a native mode and a foreign mode.
Yeah.
It has a third gear.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive. We are exploring third language acquisition, or L3, as the pros call it.
We're not talking about your first foreign language. We're talking about what happens to the architecture of the mind when a brain that already holds two languages tries to add a third.
And to guide us, we're pulling from a real heavy hitter of a text, Dynamics of Linguistic Transfer in Third Language Acquisition by Rothman and his colleagues.
And this book is, well, it's essentially a polite but firm demolition of the old ways of thinking about this.
What I loved about it is the visual it sets up. It paints the brain not as a blank slate, but as a sort of lazy contractor.
Or efficient. Let's say efficient.
Okay, an efficient contractor. When you start learning a third language, your brain doesn't want to draw new blueprints. It wants to look at the houses you've already built, your native language, your second language, and just say, hey, can I copy and paste the plumbing from that one?
That's a perfect way to put it. That copy and paste function is the core of what we call transfer. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of that, I think we need to zoom out.
We have to address the monolingual myth.
We do, because it's a huge blind spot.
This was a bit of a reality check for me. The source mentions that if you live in, say, parts of the US or the UK, you probably assume speaking one language is the default human setting.
Right. In Cedar Rapids or Henley-on-Thames, monolingualism feels normal. But that is a very specific, very Western bubble. The data shows roughly 60% of the world's population speaks at least two languages.
So if you're in Nairobi or Luxembourg, being monolingual is actually the weird thing.
Exactly. In many parts of Africa and Asia, speaking 3 or 4 languages is just Tuesday. It's just part of daily life.
Oh.
And this leads to what the authors call the European Union paradox.
Oh, I found this fascinating, the gap between what people say and what they do.
It's huge. If you survey Europeans, 88% will tell you that knowing other languages is incredibly useful. 98% say it's vital for their kids.
Everyone agrees it's a good thing.
Universally. But then you look at proficiency. In the UK, it's hovering below 20%.
But in the Netherlands or Luxembourg?
It's over 90%. So we all agree it's good. But the lived experience of having multiple languages in your head varies wildly.
And that variation is a nightmare for researchers, isn't it? The book spends so much time just trying to define who even counts as multilingual.
It does. Because scientifically, you can't just tick a box. The authors give a few scenarios to show how tricky it is. Let's try one.
Hit me.
Okay, scenario A, Juanita. Born in L.A., parents speak only Spanish. So Spanish is her first language, technically. But she starts school, English takes over, and by 20, she's dominant in English, thinks in English. Now she wants to learn Portuguese. Is she an L3 learner?
I mean, yeah. She has Spanish, she has English, now Portuguese. That's 3.
Most researchers would agree. But now scenario B. Meet Soo-young, born in Korea. At age 9, she's adopted by a French family. She moves to France, learns French and English. But, and this is the key, she completely forgets her Korean.
It's just gone.
Gone. Hasn't spoken a word in 20 years. Is she still a multilingual learner?
Ooh, that's way tougher. If the Korean is gone, is it really influencing her brain anymore? Is that file just deleted?
That is the million-dollar question. It's about attrition, or language loss. Does a lost language leave a ghost in the machine that affects the next one you learn? The text argues you can't just ignore her history.
Because her brain was wired for Korean at one point.
Right, so there isn't one multilingual score. It's a spectrum. But let's assume we have our subject. Let's get into the mechanics. Why is learning language 3 so different from language 2?
Because for decades, science just treated them as the same thing.
They did. It was the more of the same fallacy. You have your L1, your native language, which is special, and then you have non-native, or L2. It didn't matter if it was your second or your 10th.
But the source gives us this incredible case study that just dismantles that idea. Albert and Vincent. This really made it click for me.
It's one of the most compelling comparisons. So let's break it down. First, Vincent, native English speaker.
Yeah.
As an adult, he learns Spanish, and he gets really, really good at it.
Okay, so Vincent is English first, Spanish second. Now he wants to learn Portuguese.
Right. Now meet Albert. He's from Catalonia. Grew up bilingual from birth, speaking both Spanish and Catalan. Now, he also wants to learn Portuguese.
So they're both looking at Portuguese for the first time.
Correct. But here's the conflict. English is a genderless language. A table is an it. But Spanish, Catalan, and Portuguese all have grammatical gender. La mesa is feminine. El libro is masculine.
Right. So the big question is about Vincent. Since his native English brain doesn't have a concept for gendered tables, can he use his learned Spanish brain to help him with Portuguese?
Exactly. The old school thinking, especially the critical period hypothesis, would say no. It would say he learned Spanish too late, he's just faking the gender rules, he hasn't actually rewired his brain.
So he should struggle just as much as a monolingual English speaker.
That would be the prediction.
Yeah.
But that's not what happens.
Not at all.
The evidence shows Vincent can transfer those gender rules from Spanish to Portuguese very effectively. He performs better than a monolingual would. This proves that, as an adult, Vincent built a new mental blueprint for grammatical gender.
And facing Portuguese, his brain says, wait a minute, I have a blueprint for this in the Spanish folder, I'll use that.
Precisely. That is cumulative experience. The L3 learner has a menu of options. They can look at their L1 or their L2. An L2 learner only has one blueprint to reference. That choice makes L3 fundamentally different.
I want to pause on that critical period thing because that's the anxiety every adult learner feels. I'm 40, my brain is calcified, I missed the boat.
And this text offers a really hopeful counterargument. The authors push back against a strict biological cutoff. They pivot to an opportunity argument.
It's not that your brain is broken, it's that your life is different.
Exactly. A baby needs language to survive. They don't get juice otherwise. They're swimming in native input 12 hours a day.
And we might get 20 minutes on an app.
Right. We can already communicate, so the desperation isn't there. Plus, we have noise, other languages interfering. The text called this muddy access.
That's a great phrase.
It is. The mechanism for learning. The plasticity is still there. Your brain is still malleable. But the path to that mechanism is muddied by life. The door isn't locked. The hallway is just cluttered.
Okay, let's clear up the hallway a bit. We've used this word transfer, but the text makes a really sharp distinction between transfer and cross-linguistic influence. I always thought those were the same thing.
In casual conversation, sure. But in linguistics, the distinction is vital. Transfer is deep. It's structural. It's when your brain takes a mental representation, a blueprint from an old language, and installs it in the new one.
So when Vincent using the concept of gendered nouns, that's transfer.
Yes, because it's a rule system. Compare that to interference. This is often just a processing glitch, a performance error.
The text used the false cognate example, which is a classic.
The pregnant example. In Spanish, embarazada sounds like embarrassed, but it means pregnant.
A very unfortunate mix-up.
A very unfortunate glitch, yes. But, and this is the key, it doesn't mean you fundamentally restructured your brain to believe embarrassment and pregnancy are the same grammatical concept. You just grab the wrong word in the heat of the moment. It's a tip-of-the-tongue collision.
So transfer is the permanent blueprint, and interference is the brain just tripping over its own shoelaces.
A perfect summary. And to understand learning, we have to study the blueprints, not just the trips and falls.
There's another layer to this, too, this idea of explicit versus implicit knowledge. Like, do I need to be able to explain the rule to actually use it?
This connects back to how you learned your previous languages. If you learned English in a classroom in Beijing, you probably have explicit knowledge. You can recite the rule, third-person singular verbs take an S. You know that the rule exists.
Versus someone who just moved to London and picked it up. They have implicit knowledge. They know he walk sounds wrong, but they couldn't tell you why.
Right. And the fascinating question for L3 is, does knowing about grammar help? The text suggests something really cool called enhanced linguistic sensitivity.
That sounds like a superpower.
It kind of is. It seems that just by being bilingual, Your brain becomes more sensitive to linguistic cues. You've trained your ear to listen for structure.
You're just better at spotting patterns.
Exactly. You don't need the textbook memorized. Your brain has become a more efficient pattern recognition machine.
That's really motivating. It means even those high school Spanish classes you feel like you forgot, they still did something.
They did. They trained your brain to look for patterns. It's muscle memory for logic.
I want to pivot briefly to the science part of this because the authors take a moment to really geek out on the scientific method. They bring up falsifiability and use this great bird analogy.
It is a great analogy. Imagine a theory that says, birds fly because they have beaks.
Okay.
Well,
Sounds plausible. Birds have beaks. They fly.
but how do you test it? You have to try and prove it wrong. You look for a falsification. If you find a bird without a beak that can still fly, the theory's dead.
Or an animal with a beak, like a platypus, that can't fly.
The theory also fails. They bring this up because they argue that for a long time, theories about language learning were too vague. They'd just say experience matters.
Which, duh.
Exactly. It's not a prediction. To really understand L3, we need models that make risky, specific predictions. A model that says, because you know Spanish, you will make this specific mistake in Portuguese, but not that one.
And if the data doesn't match, you throw out the model.
That's how science advances. And they also mention Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually the best one.
Speaking of simple explanations, let's get back to the lazy brain. The book focuses so much on the very beginning of learning. Why start there?
Because the beginning is where the transfer is most visible. It's a state of underspecification.
Which sounds like corporate speak for, I have no idea what I'm doing.
That's basically it. The blueprint for the new language is blank. And the brain follows the principle of cognitive economy.
The polite way of saying we're lazy.
Or efficient. Why build a new house from scratch? When you start in L3, your brain is in a panic. It needs to communicate. So it looks at your L1 and your L2 and asks, which one of you looks most like this new language?
And it copies it wholesale.
Wholesale. That's the theory. It doesn't just pick little words. It might take the entire grammatical structure of your L2, say, Spanish, and dump it onto the L3, say, Italian, just to get the engine running.
So for the first few months, my brain might just be running Spanish software with Italian words.
That is exactly what the data suggests. It's easier to tweak the Spanish software than to write the Italian software from scratch. That's why L3 learners often speak with the sentence structure of their L2, even when it's wrong. It's not a mistake, it's a strategy.
That reframes the whole struggle. You're not failing to learn the new language. Your brain is just trying to be helpful by giving you a loaner car while you build the new one.
That's a fantastic analogy. And sure, sometimes that loaner car drives on the wrong side of the road, but it gets you moving.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. We've busted the monolingual myth. We've established L3 is not just L2 plus 1. It involves this complex selection process from a menu of blueprints.
And we've seen that adults are not broken learning machines. We're just experienced machines with a lot of existing software that can both help and hinder.
What I love about this is how it validates the effort. Every language you learn leaves a footprint. It's an accumulation of wealth, really. You're building this massive, interconnected network.
Absolutely. It transforms you as a learner. You're not the same person learning Portuguese as you were when you started Spanish. You have more tools.
I want to leave you with one final thought from the text that really stuck with me. If our brains are constantly copying old blueprints to handle new languages, are we ever truly seeing the new language for what it is?
Or are we just seeing a reassembled version of our past experiences?
Exactly. It's a philosophical question, isn't it?
It is.
Think about it. If 60% of the world is doing this copy-paste strategy, maybe the pure version of a language doesn't really exist in the wild. Maybe the reassembled Frankenstein version full of transfers and glitches is actually the real human norm.
That is a powerful thought. The perfect language might just be a textbook fantasy. The reality is messy, interconnected, and frankly, much more interesting.
Something to think about the next time you accidentally tell someone you're pregnant. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
A pleasure.
See you next time.